The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Lindsey Sinclair is an active listener, big picture brainstormer, passionate problem solver, energetic educator, and yes, a natural connector. Lindsey happily puts all these skills and her ability to show up authentically to her work as a business development manager at Tourism Canmore Kananaskis. Her background in events began over a decade ago. She now is a resource for planners who look to host their events in Canmore or Kananaskis. Like many people emerging from lockdowns in the travel, tourism, and events world, Lindsey and I reconnected with a renewed enthusiasm and a curiosity to explore what could be next for connectors like us. On October 22nd and 23rd, I hosted Candy's very first 2-day deep dive retreat for everyday event planners, the ultimate event experience in Banff, Alberta. The room was filled with comfy chairs, coffees in hand, and a concentrated conversation about how to create alignment between who we truly are and how we show up to the world around us. In our conversation today, Lindsey unpacks some insight she received from her time at The Ultimate and shares her thoughts on shifting from being approval-driven to living authentically. Welcome back on this sunny day here in Calgary, and welcome back to the Connector Next Door. And this has been such an incredible journey to be walking around the globe to talk to people all over the world about what connection means to them. And Lindsey, today the conversation is a little closer to home because you live in Banff. And so I'm really glad that we have this chance to chat today, get to know you a little bit, get to know your work and what connection means to you. But for starters, welcome here.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. And just to those listening, I just came off of a fantastic workshop with Lisa, which little plug there, which I know she's going to be running more in the future. So there's so many different things swirling around my brain as I reflect, and we reflect on some of the activities we did. So I'm very excited to be here.
I'm glad you were there this weekend because you and I have reconnected in the last little bit, and the chance to get to know you and where you're coming from and honestly what connection means to you is really inspiring. We say often it's about connecting ideas and projects and people together to create bigger projects and cooler ideas and coming together. Even when you came to the workshop this weekend, for you to have stepped into something, knowing that there was some kind of a connection between us, but to trust that and to trust your gut and that you were going to come and see what connections could be made on site.
This happened by chance. Lisa mentioned we have worked together previously and recently reconnected after COVID and after some time away. And she was doing this fantastic workshop and said, we'd love to have you be a part of it. And I said, absolutely. This sounds like a phenomenal opportunity for everybody. And I started to look at some of the things that she had talked about in the itinerary and some of the materials that you'd shared with us. And every time, I don't know if it's just that time of year, if it was my brain, but there was a distraction and I would kind of step away from it and kept coming back to it. And at one point I said, I'm just going to trust that that Lisa is going to do an amazing job and I'm going to learn whatever I'm going to learn and meet whoever I'm going to meet, and sort of just dove in. And that's not something that I always do. I have been a planner in a previous life. So being very organized, being very detailed, having a clear itinerary and understanding is very much in my brain. But once in a while, if there's an opportunity to just go and be, I will try to take that as much as I can as well.
That's amazing. For those of you that are listening that haven't really been following the last little bit, but I just had our very first Candy retreat. So this was called the Ultimate Event Experience. And it was really meant to be not just a getaway, but a chance for us to go deep, to understand what it means to really plan on purpose and to connect with others that are in that same space. And somebody that was at the retreat as well, and they were asking, did I handpick the people in the room? And I said, nope, we have a perfect number. We all fit exactly in the room. But it was everybody that said yes. And what was so incredible in that to me is that sometimes we put things in motion and we don't know exactly how it's going to formulate or fit or who's going to be in the room or how are they going to respond. But it just felt like the group that was there, not just were ready to learn, but truly connectors. Like I think everybody in the room had some kind of an essence that connection was at the heart of the work that they do. And you were no exception to that. I'm so glad that you were there, and just what you added to the mix was so much fun. When we get into these conversations with the connector next door, it really is about you as a person. And as we were getting into this conversation earlier, I was asking, is this something that is natural for you? So when you come to your work as a connector through your work or in your life, is it something that you feel like, even though you might not show up sight unseen very often, but tell us a little bit about you as a connector. Is that something that comes naturally for you?
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to back up a little bit here and talk a little bit about what I do. So there's more understanding of my day-to-day connections. So I work for Tourism Canmore Kananaskis. So I do it backwards. I live in Banff and I work in Canmore, but having that connection to both communities and being within the Bow Valley is fantastic. And in my role, I'm the business development manager, and I simplify this into two parts. So the first part is being an educator, creating awareness about the destination, really understanding what our partners offer, services are, what their needs are, and going out and finding opportunities for them. So creating that awareness about the destination, education, what could be possible for potential business partners. Mm-hmm. And then once I go out and have that great understanding of our partners' needs, our partners' offerings, who could potentially be a great fit for them, I go into kind of the second phase, which is that connection. So connecting opportunities, whether that is through people, through businesses, through destinations within the industry. That could also be with grants. So it could be with funding, it could be with staff. So there's a number of opportunities that presents itself within that world of connection. So every day for me is very, very different. And that's what I love about it, is really going, asking questions, finding out, what's there, where are those need periods or points or challenges, what are our successes, what are our stories, and how can I share that and have an impact on that. And then, as I said, going through and hopefully making those things happen. For me, I create that connection, and then a lot of times, hopefully they'll tell me it was great and they loved it, and and I hear what comes out of it. And sometimes I don't, and that's okay too, because I know we are living in a busy world, and if I don't hear, I take that as a good thing. And it's because I'm assuming that they are working on a project or an opportunity or a plan, and they're able to move forward together. So.
And how did you get into that? That seems like for many of us, even in the event planning world, that seems like a pretty incredible space that you're living and working in. How did you get into that type of work?
I think I really fell into it. When I went to school, I took recreation. I thought, you know what? I enjoy
Ah.
having fun. And I have,
That's why we get along, maybe.
and I thought, I have no idea what I want to do or where I want to be, which was very different for my siblings. So that was a bit of a challenge for me.
Hmm.
And I said, you know, I enjoy having fun, and sports is very important to me, and programs are very important to me. So I fell into recreation, still didn't know what I was going to do. So I followed that up with public relations and did a lot more on the event side of things. And that's what I really enjoyed,
Hmm.
seeing the reactions or the impact on somebody's face in front of you at some of those events. Um, Making my long story short, I came out west from Ontario. I came for one season and never left.
That's
Got
great.
Yeah, and got into tourism. So came out to the
Hmm.
Bow Valley, and I got into kind of sticking with that recreation theme, but coming into tourism, and I went into sales, and through partnerships and connections, meeting different people and understanding the different possibilities that were available to me, kind of just kept making my way through and ended up at a destination management organization, the Tourism Bureau of Canmore and Kananaskis, which I am absolutely loving and so happy that I found my way here.
Well, and I love the journey that you've just shared with us, because I think a lot of people that we work with here at Candy and a lot of people that get into event planning, their probably their journey is as varied and layered as yours as well, because many times we don't anticipate or we don't understand necessarily what event planning all entails until you're in it. And then you look back and you're like, oh, hang on, I'm an event planner. Or hang on, I've done something like that before and I could adapt it to something new. And what you're talking about is, I actually have a background and spent some time in Parks and Rec here in Calgary for a while too, and love the community aspect of what it means to be in recreation, and that it's the whole person. And so when we talk about the whole person in any context, there is that feeling like, how do we gather people together well? How do we speak to them and give them experiences that are going to matter and have fun at the same time? That is definitely something we do here at Candy. So it's interesting to me, as you've gone through the journey and you feel, or you seem like you feel very at home in the role that you have now. Do you see where maybe the connections that you've made and this new role that you've got, anything that you're really excited about moving forward to explore or to connect differently or to create in the role that you have today?
Absolutely. And I think, especially in the role that I'm in, is that connection is not just a person to a person or a
Mm.
business to a business. It's also connection to the community. So being a part of the festivals or the events, or knowing that I'm connected to the local economy and
Mm.
providing a difference, bringing opportunities into our community that way, whether that is connection through, as I mentioned, potential staff. There's also a huge connection, and something I think that is so strong within the Bow Valley, in the Canmore, Kananaskis area as well, is that connection to nature, whether that
Mm.
is the environment, your connection to yourself while you're out there. There is a connection to the future, and how in my role and in my organization, I can impact some of the sustainability practices, or looking at responsible travel and who's coming in and how do we do that. So for me, that connection is so much more than when we generally look at it as a person to person piece. There's so
Mhm.
many broader parts to it, and I'm in a position where I can impact so many more things. Uh,
Mm.
so I can really broaden that reach, and who I'm speaking to, or what story is being told.
And how do you find it? I love when you relate this to a connection with nature or a connection with getting maybe out of your regular day-to-day or your comfort zone? How is that when people come and visit you? For those of you that don't know, Canmore and Kananaskis is very close to the Canadian Rockies here. So it is an incredibly beautiful place that people come from all over the world to visit and to enjoy and to soak in. What is that like when you see people actually reconnecting, even with themselves through nature or connecting with nature? What's that like?
Yeah, and one of the favorite part of my job is it can be very humbling for me to see people visiting the Rocky Mountains, being immersed in that nature, because you can see the transformation on their face. You can see their soul being nourished. You can see that reflection within them. So it's very humbling to me when I see that, and when I'm part of that, knowing, I had a hand in helping this person have this moment right now, and they can take that with them. It's so humbling because I live this, I get to live it every day. And not everyone gets that opportunity. But when they do get the opportunity to visit the land that we're in and soak in their surroundings, you can see the transformation in them in front of you.
Mm. And it's probably something you can't completely describe to somebody that hasn't experienced it until they're on site, right? Until they show up, they drive, fly, however they get to see you and actually get to breathe in that mountain air. They probably, I think a lot of people, it's like anybody traveling anywhere in the world, where until you're actually there and you're smelling what you're smelling, you're seeing what you're seeing, and you're breathing in the air in a different place, there is something that awakens in us, I think. And I love putting myself in a place where I feel more creative, things are expansive, or that there's opportunities. And I think we felt that at the retreat as well. For many of us, that was a pulling away. It was a coming away from what's normal, from our homes, coming together, but in a place that's so gorgeous, where you actually have the view of the mountains from where we were at. But there's also an energy there, I think, that's a little bit different than other places.
Absolutely. And I always say photos do not do it justice. They really don't, because they don't encapsulate that feeling, that energy, that, oh my God, this is where I am right now.
Yeah.
And you can't get that out of a photo, but you can get that standing in the mountains, breathing that air, understanding, where you fit into that world, or just taking it in too. There's definitely sometimes those quiet moments. I've done nighttime snowshoes where you turn off your headlamps, just take in the stars. It's winter, it's quiet, and you just be. And that is some of my favorite moments that I've had out here in the Rockies.
So beautiful. We talked a lot this weekend about our purpose and aligning who we are to the purpose in our work. And you said that you had a couple of notes, or we just were chatting before I hit record, some of the things that you were taking away. And it always is something. I don't think we've ever arrived in finding our purpose or finding how that actually relates to the world around us. But do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey and coming to the place that you are? And you do sound like you're very grounded in the work that you do, and even your relationship with your environment there. What has been your learning in the last, especially since COVID, I think, or the lockdowns that were COVID, and we're reopening? What does that look like for you when you start to explore what your purpose is in your work?
And I'm glad you asked this question. I have lots of notes beside me that I'm sure I'll be referencing as I chat about this. But since the workshop and the retreat that we did, I've continued to do work. I've continued to look at my purpose and my intent and who I show up as, and what are my core values. What does that drill down to? It came down to connection, growth, and honesty. And I think that aligns very well with what I'm doing. I'm a connector every day in my role, but also creating that growth, whether that is personally when you're having those moments in that nighttime snowshoe, whether that is through partnerships. And is that the economic impact that we talked about? Is that through connection to the nature and the environment and giving back in those ways? And when I look at growth, that's a big part of it as well, individually, financially, personally, all of those different things, connecting one to one, whatever that might be. And then honesty. And that comes down to another tidbit that I took away is authenticity over approval.
Mm.
And what does that mean to you? Is this a genuine connection? Are you trying to seek approval, acceptance, recognition? So are we honest in the story that we're sharing? Are we honest in the opportunity that's there? Do we fully believe that there is mutual benefit to these connections that we're providing? And if we're not authentic in that, then instead we are seeking that approval or recognition, acceptance, whatever that word is for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a very interesting moment for me going through that exercise, drilling down to those core values and looking at how they integrate into my daily life, into what I do professionally, into what I do personally as well. So it's all kind of coming full circle for me this week.
Well, and that was such a great takeaway from Bridget Brown, who was one of our guest instructors for the weekend. And I think many of us, when we talk about connection, I think I was like this too, even when I was younger, but the idea that I would do it like someone else, I don't know that I truly understood what connection meant for myself. This would have been years ago. And I loved doing events. I loved putting special gatherings together. And I did a lot of work with kids and youth. And I think it wasn't until I got really clear for myself on what it was that made me tick, what was exciting for me, that took me beyond just putting all the nuts and bolts together to make something work. And I think I was really good at that. But it was really about getting true to myself so that when I would show up, it didn't matter what kind of an event or what kind of, whether it was a partnership or some kind of campaign I was putting together, but that authenticity had to be front and center. And sometimes that's really unnerving or a little bit scary for us. Or I don't know how you feel about this idea of kind of putting your authenticity first before we're seeking that approval. Is that something that you think will affect how you're connecting with others moving forward?
Absolutely. And this is a piece that I have struggled with in the past, more so personally than professionally for me and for everybody that's going to be different. And I think that we need to be, set boundaries and be okay with not every connection is going to be perfect. Not every connection is going to work. And whether that is a friendship, a relationship with a work colleague or a business, or even that could be a brand at the grocery store that all of a sudden
right.
this food doesn't agree with you, and that's okay. And I think that we have always been told to adjust ourselves to make somebody more comfortable or make a situation more comfortable. But that is not being authentic. That's not being you. And if it's something doesn't feel right in work or in your own life or whatever, we need to accept that situation, or that this is this interaction, this is this connection, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be improved upon if it's not serving either of us. We can walk away from that, and that's okay. That should, in theory, be able to be applied to anything. And so for me, we had a lot of discussions around that, and that was really a big one of where in my life am I leaning towards that approval or that acceptance versus that authenticity?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm showing up for being or accepted or approved, showing up as somebody else, do I need that connection? I don't know. And that's questions that we need to ask ourselves and really look at, does this mutually serve everybody? And if it does, we genuinely want to help other people. We genuinely want to see them succeed. And if you're not authentic, then what are those motives or emotions behind that?
Right. And then also, what's the payoff, right? What do we give up when we're really not showing up as ourselves, as our true selves? And we did talk a little bit. Actually, it was interesting because I was talking to Kim. So Kim Westland was one of the other gals that was with us, helping to lead through some sessions. And we were chatting about how everyone in the room, as much as everyone felt really connected, everyone really had their distinct personalities and perspectives and ways of showing up and ways of speaking. And that actually, I think, added so much to it. So it wasn't that, because sometimes maybe when we feel like we're looking for authenticity instead of acceptance, sometimes we might feel like we're going to be separated from others then, because now we're choosing us, or us being authentic is going to push others away. And what I saw in the room was that it was exactly the opposite. We had a lot of people showing up authentically as themselves, all of you really leaning in. But it actually seemed to create more of a connection between the ones in the room. Did you find that?
I really did. And we talked about this as well, is why don't we show up as our true selves? And that could be fear or perception or something that we have told ourselves, that could be you're embarrassed. But when you put yourself in a vulnerable spot and you're okay doing that, I think you really realize how many people genuinely care for you or will be there for you. And to lean into those connections and consciously choose their support over the support of that one person in the room who is not in your corner. And I think everyone can relate to this sometimes. You don't need to have everybody in that room on your side. Really lean into those that support you and encourage you and motivate you and give you all those feelings that you want to feel. That's a true, genuine connection. And as we went through different exercises and through those 2 days, you could see different experiences, different backgrounds, different beliefs, but everyone showed up in their own way. Everyone shared what they were willing to share, but I think every person left a little piece of them, put a little piece of them on the table so we could see who that person was. And that really gave us the ability and set that foundation to connect. Now, will all of us be best friends going on from that? I don't know. Probably not. But that within that group, there's opportunity for future possibilities.
Yeah. It really is pretty incredible to me, I think, sometimes when we allow ourselves, and we started with that in this conversation, the fact that you were willing to take a risk, step in, show up, and bring whatever you had to bring with you as far as your experience and your ability to not just you learned with the group, but you were also there as somebody that was part of our purpose presentations, and you were one of our feedback coaches. I was calling you a guest judge, but judge is really counter to everything we were doing on the weekend. But this idea of actually listening in, I'd love to go there a little bit, because what you were adding and some of the feedback you were giving to the others, to some of the peers in the group that were presenting their purpose story. So this was an exercise that we did where we were talking about how are we going to present those events or a campaign or something they were working on with through a story lens in a way that would really share who they are, how they're being authentic, and then giving space for a little bit of feedback from both, Kim and Bridget, but then also having you chime in as well. What was that experience like for you to actually give some feedback on these purpose presentations?
I really enjoyed it, and providing feedback. Kim and Bridget, they're so good on the content and marketing and how to say things. So I really didn't want to touch kind of those those side of things. Those are the experts. Let them be the experts. But I have worked with a number of planners in really listening to them and understanding their needs in terms of setting boundaries and expectations of what's possible, and then going back to who that ultimate decision maker is and how do they show ROI, so return on investment. How do they show the value in what they're proposing? So for me, I was focusing more on how that presenter, or how I perceived that presenter to be feeling, and how I felt hearing that, and could this be adjusted to make it more clear, or is there a part that, this is the important part and we need to emphasize that, or what that kind of looks like. And that's something that I say, as well as in my role, I'm very much a resource for people. So I was kind of looking at some of those things that I've worked specifically with planners on before, and how that might impact, selling tickets to that event, or getting that decision maker to sign off on this experience, whatever that might be. Which it was really fun to see everybody see their passion, that they love what they do, and knowing that, I have my expertise and I can help you. And that's a big thing for me, kind of going back to those core values and talking about that growth.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that can be, again, personally, professionally, but being able to provide feedback that they can choose to take or not. I mean, totally up to them. But to have that opportunity to potentially make a difference in their growth, in their journey, in their event or work, or whatever that might be.
And it's really your perspective as somebody that is working in this industry, that is hearing a lot of quote unquote pitches, that is finding ways for people to get connected to either opportunities or to the work you do, or to something that is within your circle of influence. And I think when you were sharing some of your feedback, that's one thing that was, I think, so helpful, was that you were from a very practical perspective of let's get you over maybe some of the nerves, or a few nerves, but over the nerves, over some of the details, but let's get to the point where you really feel like this could be a thing, that the clarity is there, that the messaging is there, that there's something to hang on to. Because sometimes when we're really passionate, or we're working really closely in our purpose, even sometimes when we're showing up very authentically, we forget the details. We forget that we also have to make it something that will apply or can be tangible for somebody to hang on to, and then help you, or show up at an event, or become part of something tangible. And you're seeing that so much, I think, with the clients that you work with and with the partners that you work with. If you were to give people that are listening today, so they didn't get the chance to experience the ultimate this last weekend, but if you were to give somebody some of those tips that you were giving to those that were presenting, so somebody says, I have this amazing event, it's really aligned with our purpose as an organization, we're really excited about it. What would be something that you would say to somebody in regards to helping them connect well with the right people?
Ooh, good question. Whew. I think there's a couple of things for me. Being vulnerable, being passionate, show your emotion,
Mm,
show that. But at the same time, you need to believe what you're saying.
mm,
So you could feel very passionate about, thinking of Canmore and Kananaskis. One of the greatest topics there is our environment, our backdrop, the mountains.
mhm.
So if I'm talking about the environment and the possibilities and the connection, I can throw facts out there, which give me maybe some credibility, which is great. But do I believe in my story? Do I believe in the words that are coming out of my mouth? Am I speaking with confidence? And in turn, does that allow you to feel that? Can you put yourself in that moment, in that picture, in that experience? And being able to do that, to share that story, to share that experience, to share yourself, I think that
Mm,
really creates the connection that puts somebody
yeah.
where you are or where you might be. So I think that's when it goes back to that authenticity. You know, are you speaking with passion? Are you speaking with your knowledge? I mean, if you don't know what you're talking about or you don't care about it, people probably aren't going to listen. But you're also confident in the words that are coming out of your mouth as you're talking about something you're knowledgeable on or passionate on or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Those are, I think that came up quite a few times is, you're very knowledgeable, but
Mhm.
do you believe in your confidence? And sometimes we saw that is in the room, somebody who had so much confidence and then standing in front of the group. You didn't see that, but that they can do it. They have
Mhm.
the ability and they have the knowledge and the passion and just really showing up, all of you.
Yeah. And that's when we talk about the authenticity. I think sometimes, depending on your environment, but sometimes we do feel like if we bring too much of ourselves, I used to feel like that. If I bring too much of me, too much playful, too much, and I love to laugh, will they take me seriously? And I think sometimes we forget that that's the spark, that's the it, whatever it is, right? And when people want a
Yeah.
partner, I loved what you just said, because you're saying, yes, there's all the stats and there's all the information and there's the details, and we need that. But without this layer of not only telling a story, but exactly what you're saying, where you've owned it and you believe it and you've practiced what that could actually sound like, and where maybe some of those connection points might be for somebody to hook in and say, this is something I can work with. Let's try to, play that out and see how that's
Yeah.
going to work. Then that almost builds more confidence to go after it in a more articulate way every time you do it again. I love that as a
Yeah.
piece of advice. And it might feel, for those of you that are listening, maybe it'll feel a little bit unnerving too, because if you haven't been working this way, if you felt like maybe some of your transactions are limited, it might be why. There
Yeah.
might be something that's missing, that you're not showing up truly as yourself.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because there's something that comes into my mind is, I'm a very clumsy person. That
Okay.
is just who I am. So some of the different roles I've been in and spaces I've been in have been sales. And I
Uh-huh.
have shown up with, my lunch spilled on my shirt. I have attempted to open a door for somebody and walked right into it because I was pushing on a pull. Tripped upstairs. Like I've done a lot of very clumsy things in front of high profile people, in front of politicians, in front of a number of different people. And like, oh, well, that happened. And I'll just keep moving on and just telling you, the information, whatever I was talking about, the story, blah, blah, blah. And they'll take a moment and they're like, Are you okay? I was like, oh, it's fine. Happens all the time. Don't worry about it. And there are people who I've created relationships with who ultimately decided to give me their business for whatever it was, because they said, you were real. You're very charming. I'm like, that's another word for clumsy because I showed up as who I was. And that is me, an authentic person who walks into walls, draws things, but I still have the knowledge and the passion and the other things to support that.
Yeah.
So saying, Lindsey, we don't want to put you in front of somebody because you probably would need a different shirt after your lunch, but we'd love to have you behind the scenes working with us. So
but isn't it refreshing when you meet somebody like that? When you meet somebody that is not just maybe a little clumsy or stumbly or whatever it is, and I bumble my words sometimes, so I totally get that. But somebody, again, that owns it, like you're just owning it as part of who you are, and that you can carry both. And it doesn't have to be, well, now I'm professional, Lindsey, and now I'm relaxed and I'm going to be myself, Lindsey. And I think the difference between those, and that was, again, one of those exercises, we did this alignment exercise where the closer we get to who we are and what we're showing to the world, that is this space where we're actually living on purpose, in our purpose, in a way that we don't have to work so hard. Yeah, we always,
absolutely.
We already have to work so hard to make life work. Why would you allow, that to be part of your work where you're separating those two parts of yourself? So
absolutely. And I think it also creates a safe space that allows the other people with you to be their authentic self. Say, okay, well, she just walked into that door. I guess I can, come down a little bit, and it creates a safe environment or a safe space. And that's a big part of it too, is your surroundings of who you're with, what that setting might be, just to feel welcome and safe and to be genuinely and authentically you.
And probably there's about 15 stories behind something that happens where they're like, I actually remember when I did the same thing, or there's always, someone that had a similar experience, and that creates connection probably too. So yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a beautiful way for us to wrap the conversation today, because a lot of people, even that, might be something that they can percolate on over the next few days. And if you were to leave the people that are listening with something that they can take away into their week or their weekend as they're listening to this, what would you encourage them with when you talk about connection and connecting well?
I think it's going back to stealing Bridget's nugget is authenticity over approval. Be you, and be okay if something isn't exactly what you want it to be. And that's where you will get those genuine connections. That's where you're going to see those opportunities. You're going to have the right people behind you and in your corner. And if something, is off or doesn't feel right, or you don't feel like yourself, then maybe that's not for you. And that's okay to say no, or to create boundaries and set those boundaries of, I'm willing to move forward with this opportunity or this connection, in these parameters. And that's okay too. So really
beautifully okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Listen to that person inside of you and do what feels right for you.
I love it. Thank you. And so if anyone, and I know this is going to spark some thoughts and some conversation, how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to continue the conversation?
Absolutely. So you can reach us on our website at explorecanmore.ca. or you can email me as well, Lindsey, LINDSEY at explorecanmore.ca, or you can find me, Lindsey Sinclair, on LinkedIn as well. And I'm always happy to connect about the destination, about opportunities, or just if you want to chat. I love chatting as well. So happy to connect anytime.
Awesome. Thank you again for what you added to last weekend. And thank you so much for showing up today and having this conversation. It's been really insightful for me too. So I will have things that I will be writing some notes about after we say goodbye too. But thank you again, Lindsey, for being with me.
Thank you, Lisa.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.